think it's called COVID. Corona! It's the Coronacast with Daliso, Chaponda!
We are about to go live, get started with Coronacast comedy. And I will say to you that I will try to be funny. I've got a very interesting subject, which is homeschooling, which is going to be today's episode. So welcome to Coronacast comedy. Coronacast comedy show with me, Daliso Chaponda, but I will tell you that I might not be as funny as usual because I have had a tough day, right? And I decided when I started this, whether it's been a bad day or a good day, I got to do it because, it's partly for me, it's partly for you. I'm going to do every day, whatever state it is. If I get the coronavirus, I'm going to do this coughing and sputtering because I've decided to do it daily. I had a tough day. It's been a tough day in the UK. First of all, I did my budgeting, and you always think that your savings can last longer than they actually can. And I've done the calculations, and I'm like, wow, I think I can do 3 months, maybe 4 months at a stretch, and then things are going to get crazy. And I'm not strong. I've not got muscles. I can't join a gang and attack people. And my only skill is being funny. I don't know what I'll do, but hopefully we'll be wrapped up in 3 to 4 months. And I know other people have having similar anxieties. And also the UK is now locked down. We're locked down. I'm stuck in this apartment alone. So anyway, so that's the state of mind I'm in. But hopefully I'll still be funny enough for you guys. I'll cheer you guys up. Let's get started. Today's subject is going to be about homeschooling because it's something on people's minds because schools all across the world have been closing. So more and more parents have to teach their kids from home, right? It's not the same as pure homeschooling because they are still following the school curriculums and they're getting like lesson plans from the schools, but now it's being monitored and run by their parents. I decided I wanted to talk about it, decided I want to write jokes about it, decided to do some research, talk to a few people. I did not know the can of worms I was stepping into. People are so passionate and it's a crazy divisive subject. I did not know. Yesterday I did faith. I did religion, and I thought religion was the one which was going to get people yelling at me. Hell no. Homeschooling, people have got passions, right? And people think each other are idiots. So let me just summarize what the situation is, and then you will understand why I had such a surprise. Because you see, the history of homeschooling is if we go back 500 years, everybody used to do it, right? Absolutely everybody was homeschooled, right? That was just the way things were done. You taught your kids how to speak, how to get by, and then maybe later they did an apprenticeship. That was how almost everybody went. And then the really wealthy used to have tutors. And that's how it was for ages. That's how it was for generations. This is how it's always been. And then when education first came, it was like a revolution, right? It was a revolution because suddenly everybody was learning how to read. Everybody was learning how to talk. And everybody was learning. And it was this new, exciting thing where people could change their lives through education, right? But then around the 60s, when there'd now been a lot of formal education, there was a big movement towards homeschooling because there was a movement who felt that formal schooling before the ages of 12 was damaging kids socially, academically, mentally, and socially, right? And this is the point where now there's like a big debate because people who homeschool are really passionate about it, and a lot of them feel that regular education is damaging to kids. And then on the other side, there are all these people who look down on people doing homeschooling, say, hey, you're abusing your kids, you're just a bunch of nutters, and they yell at each other. And I just wanted to make jokes, and I was just calling a bunch of people who've homeschooled or been homeschooled and saying, hey, what are your experiences? And they were like, oh, you better not be on the side of those regular education people. And I'm like, I don't have a side. I just want to be funny. And so this is what I decided I have to do after talking to a bunch of people. is today's episode, I'm not going to take a side. I'm going to be like a journalist. I'm going to essentially tell you the story of my day. I spoke to 5 people. These are the titles I've given them. One of them was the hippie super mom. Okay? Hippie super mom, right? The second one was the school of grandma. I'll explain when I come here. The third one was the teacher on hiatus giving advice. And the next one is educating geniuses. And the last one is son of a preacher man. These were going to be the 5 sections of the show. So let's get started with the first person I spoke to, who I'm calling Hippie Supermom. Okay, now the first thing you have to understand is this is one of my closest friends, right? I won't say her name to keep her privacy. This is one of my closest friends, possibly my favorite person on the planet, right? And she's someone who chose it. What you'll find in this episode is I discovered some people homeschool because they choose to, and a lot of people homeschool because they're forced into it. They have no choice. But she's someone who chose it because she does not agree with the institution of education, right? And she's the one who told me that I shouldn't even use the term homeschool for what's going on with these corona kids. Because what's happening with these corona kids, I'm not saying kids who have corona, but kids who can't go to school because of corona, is that they're going home and they're being taught their school curriculum under the supervision of their parents. That's not the same as homeschooling. The way she made it seem, homeschooling, it's like a path, it's a choice. It's things where you don't teach in the regular way, because it's not the schools you have a problem, but you have a problem with the way that they teach and the way that they punish kids and the way that it's based on competition. So with her, it's more of a change of an ethos and what people are doing, calling what they're doing homes. Anyway, as you can see, I was way out of my depths. I went to talk to her like, hey, talk to me about your experiences. And I realized I was in the middle of a discussion. I had not been in the middle of it because she just started ranting at me. And she's not the first person to rant at me today. I had 3 moms yell at me today. And I felt like a little kid. Moms have a certain voice when they're ranting at you that puts you on you're just like, yes, I'll do whatever you say. But this friend of mine who homeschools, I will say that she did change my mind. Because if you asked me 10 years ago, I thought that homeschooling was terrible, right? I was totally against it. My only experience of it was somebody who I had met who had been homeschooled for religious reasons by a crackpot religious family and had hated it and resented it. They hadn't been allowed to listen to Prince. They hadn't been allowed to listen to Michael Jackson or Madonna. It was devil music, and they had a very stringent, and I associated that with homeschooling, while it has nothing to do with homeschooling. That's more their views and things like that. And also, I had an amazing school. I think this is my other bias. I went to one of the best schools in Africa, in Swaziland, called Waterford Kamhlaba. There was a teacher. There were teachers who changed my life. I mean, there was a teacher, Judy Hall, an English teacher, who is, if I actually have to trace it back, she is the reason I'm a writer. Between her and a teacher I had at university, Kate Bly, those two very much inspired me and turned me into who I am. So I looked at homeschooling and I was like, one person can't provide all of that. And I really didn't understand it. But then when I saw this friend of mine do it, it's amazing in that her kids, every curiosity is indulged. I was hanging out with them and her kid saw something about a dinosaur. And then that day's lesson became all about dinosaurs, right? And then if we're walking down the street and he picks up something, that's what she starts talking about. And the amount of caring and the amount of patience is so amazing, but I admire it. I don't think I could do it. I was brought up the African way, where kids are expected to be very resilient. You get by with minimal attention, right? She, on the other hand, has been doing 120% attention to her child. It's very amazing. It's very interesting. And she was the person who I first spoke to. And she's the one who made me realize that I need to take a different tack and just talk to people. Because initially I had questions. I was like, how do you discipline the kids? And how do you how do you deal with them not doing homework, and what are your priorities? And I realized it's better to just have a chat and see what happens. So that's the first person. That's my hippie supermom. I call her hippie because, you know, she's pure hippie. She's vegan. In fact, every time I see her, there's something else she's not eating. She's very healthy and wonderful. May not be seeing Facebook. I don't know what's the deal with Facebook. It doesn't stream nicely. But let's do this. Oh, hello, Acid Raptor from Twitch. You may be my first viewer from Twitch. Good to have you. I didn't know people go on Twitch for anything other than video games, so I'm so glad you're here. Let's go on to number 2 person I spoke to, and I'm going to call it the School of Grandma. Now, the person I spoke to is a very funny person, actually a comedian, who I know, female comedian, sort of starting out. And I spoke to her, and it was really interesting because she's not homeschooled, but when she was younger, she was homeschooled for a while, but for a very hilarious reason. So the way it works in the UK is if you're in an area, you apply to a few schools in the area, right? Which you want to go in. You put down your first choice, your second choice, and your third choice. She got selected for her third choice, and her parents thought it was such a shit school and it was so dangerous that she was better off being taught by her grandmother. Now, the thing about her grandmother is her grandmother did not have a great education. So this really was a case of the blind leading the blind. Now, this is a damning indictment of the schools around Bradford, that they would rather her half-educated grandmother educates her than send her to that Bradford school. But what was even more funny is that her grandmother had the most unique way of teaching her. She would just watch television with her, right? So she would watch programs that she felt had some educational value. So it would be like, oh, let's watch Countdown. It's going to teach you spelling. Oh, it also teaches you math, right? And she would take her for walks, and the amazing thing is I feel like her grandmother didn't change her life at all. She was just like, I'm going to do what I was going to do anyway, and I'll give her a reason. Oh, we're watching EastEnders. It will teach you how to deal with conflict. It was absolutely wonderful. She did say that the way that her grandmother used to discipline her if she was naughty would just clip her around the ear, right? Old school. And then the other thing she also said is that the hardest part of it was the social aspect, you know, because it was so solitary. She didn't have a lot of friends. And eventually she had enough and she went to that crap school because she wanted to make friends and be around her friends. So the biggest struggle was the social aspect. And the hilarious thing is, though, when she went to the new school, even though she was months and months behind, because it was such a shit school, she caught up in like 2 weeks. So that was the experience and story of the woman who went to the School of Grandma. Excellent. Let's look at the comments. Do we have any comments? Very smart grandma. That's what's getting you through your nursing degree. Some videos on human anatomy. It's amazing how nowadays you can learn practically anything on YouTube. You see all of this thing, the streaming, the way that all of this is happening. I just watched a bunch of tutorials, taught myself how to do this, and that's pretty much it. Isabel asked, how long have I been doing comedy? My mother would say, since the day that I was born. Tony Vino asks, will any of my homeschool loving friends take your kids for a week? That's brilliant. You've been doing it for 2 days and you're already trying to get rid of your kids. That is the mark of a true man. And Dominic Woodward said, I've been homeschooling our kids today. Total nightmare. And you are trained with dealing with kids. This is a man who entertains kids all the time as a magician, and he can't deal with his own kids. Right? This is what happens. This is a very difficult thing. I'm very glad that I have not procreated, though it would be nice to have a woman over here. I can't touch anyone. I'm considering phone sex, but I don't have any willing partners. I'm thinking of just calling my female friends and just being like, hey, phone sex isn't cheating. Let's have a dirty chat. I'm kidding. Don't worry. Okay, let's go into the next. Joanne Collins, you hear me good? You've got an 8 free to loan to a good homeschooling home. You've got 8 children or one child who is 8, Joanne Collins? She said, I've got 8 free. You've got 8 children? Joanne, how can you stand? Anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is a teacher on hiatus. Now, this one is not actually someone who's homeschooled. This is someone from the UK education system who is currently on hiatus because all of her school has been closed because of Corona. And I just had a chat with her about advice which we could give to people who were homeschooling on how to homeschool and things which they need to keep in mind. And I also asked her what she misses most about teaching and what she misses least. So she first said the biggest bit of advice she can give to all of you people who are apprentice homeschoolers is ask for help if you don't understand the work set. A lot of people think they can figure it out, but ask for help. If it's math and you're bad at math, don't try to mislead your kid with your bad math. Ask for help, right? Ask for help. Then I asked her what she misses the most, and she said the routine. And I think that's true for a lot of us, right? Routine is such an it's amazing how my routine was an unconventional routine in that I would write in the day, travel to a gig, hang out with comedians, perform the gig, hang out with crowd members, go home. That was my routine. And it was a very odd routine, but I did the same thing almost every day. And it's so weird when you lose your routine. How are you people dealing with losing your routine? Do you have any new routines that you are now doing in Corona time? Put that in the comments. And then we come over here to what did she miss least? This is a UK school teacher. What she misses least is one, having to follow a dress code, right? So I hope you're chilling in your home, just dressed in an anorak and a toupee and a mustache. Just wear what you like, no dress code. Embrace the fact that you don't have a dress code. And then also, she doesn't miss actually talking to the pupils. That's hilarious. She was a teacher who did not want to talk to her nutter students. I don't know what school she was in, but they must have been nightmares. Well, enjoy your time away from the little devils. So those were her 3 little things which she said to me. Let me look at the comments before we move on to educating geniuses. And by the way, some of you may be aware of the jokes. I'm just talking, and some of it's vaguely humorous. At the end of it, after all the chit-chat talk show part, that is when let's move on to educating geniuses. Now, I told you that some people choose to homeschool and other people are forced into it. The 4th person I spoke to actually was someone who was forced into the situation because her children have special needs, right? Her children are autistic, but it's a very complicated situation because people use a blanket term, but kids are so unique, right? And this is what makes it difficult. You can't just send all kids to a special needs school because, for example, her kid has trouble socializing and dealing with big crowds of people, so couldn't necessarily go to a mainstream school. But at the same time, her kid is like a very gifted academically. She's like bringing up a Newton kid who's far, far advanced. And then he wouldn't thrive in a special needs school because he is so advanced, but then he couldn't go to Anyway, so you see, she was in a pickle. And so I admire this so much. She had to sacrifice her own dream. This is one of the things about homeschooling. Often you have people, like I told you, that person who's my favorite person, she's like a genius. She's like a genius academic person, and she had to put her dreams on hold to homeschool her child. But then that's how I was looking at it then. Now I actually see that her new dream, her better dream, is bringing up her child. So it's not so much a sacrifice. But anyway, back to this person with the very unique children. She realized that what she needed to do, right? What she needed to do was she needed to teach her children because their needs were so unique, right? And she told me that it was very difficult, right? Because there's no support from the UK government. She had to fill in loads and loads of forms because you can ask for support. but it's a nightmare. I mean, I spent the day trying to fill out forms to try and get support while, there are no live comedy shows going on. And it's just, bureaucracy is a tangled mess. And so that was one frustration. And then the other thing is, she said it's been very expensive because she's having to buy all of the textbook, all of the books, and over the years so far, she's spent thousands on this, right? And she's just paying for it herself. So it's been very, very difficult, right? Because she's doing a very different kind of homeschooling. I told her that some people do homeschooling where they let the kids explore and they just sort of talk about whatever the kids want and they do a very free experimental. She is doing the school curriculum. Right? So she is following the school curriculum because she wants her children, when they grow up, to be able to go to universities. She wants them to do the same standardized test. And her greatest difficulty is that she has to teach herself stuff to teach her genius kid. She has to cram just so that she can teach him. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. That's so hard. It actually takes me back. It takes me back to when I was at school. When I was at school, I really, really wanted people to think I was clever. I was pretty clever, but I wanted people to think I was a genius, particularly young, beautiful women. And I remember there was a young, beautiful woman called Annette who used to come ask me for help in mathematics, right? And I was able to do it, but it would take a lot of thinking and a lot of work, and I didn't want her to know it was hard for me. So I'd always say something dismissive like, oh, I don't have time now. What number do you have a problem with? She'd be like, number 4. Like, we'll talk about it later. Come see me later. And then I would sit down and I would work on it for like 2 hours, solve it myself, and then put it away. And then when she came later, I'd be like, which one were you having problems with? And then she'd give it to me and I'd take a look and I'd say, oh, that one's easy. And I would do the solution. I don't know what I thought I was going to get out of it, but I did love the fact that I got this admiration from her. Anyway, that was what I did. And I remember I felt so heartbroken when a kid called Robert Mugizi came to the school, and he was an actual math genius, not someone pretending to be a math genius by working hard. And he stole all of my students, even the beautiful Annette. Alas, alack. But let's move on. The greatest thing she said about educating her kids, homeschooling, is that she gets to spend so much time with her children. She says a lot of parents don't actually know who their children are, and she says that's a delight. And so that is my little interaction with the lady who is educating geniuses. Let's take a look at the comments. Okay, so Lanky Git says, kudos to this woman. Yes, kudos to her. It's really amazing what she did. Excellent. What else do we have? Isabel, I don't think my mom can handle me all day. Oh, are you a young kid who's being homeschooled? Well, what you got to do is drive your mama crazy. It's your job as a child. Let's go on to the last person I spoke to before we get to the jokes. So the last person who I spoke to is very interesting because it's a young fan of mine who is a child who is currently being homeschooled, right? And his story is fascinating because he's currently in India. He's a Malawian in India, and his parents were missionaries to India, which meant that he's always doing a lot of traveling, and they realized he couldn't be in one school, so they started homeschooling. The other reason was he was in a school where he was the only black kid and he was being bullied, right? So that's why they took him out and homeschooled him. Interestingly, one of the reasons I value going to school in a weird way is because I was bullied, right? This is going to sound very strange, but I think one of the biggest things I learned is how to deal with bullies. And I don't think I would have learned that in a homeschooled environment. And it has helped me so much because when you leave school, you meet bullies. You meet people who in comedy green rooms say aggressive things and think they're being alpha male. And you learn how to deal with them. You learn how to disarm them. Now, it would be a wonderful world if no one had to deal with these things. But it's just I admire what your parents did, taking you out because of the bullying. But I also think you are if you had stayed in school, you would have found a way to deal with it. But I say that maybe some kids never find out and have a miserable time. So I'm glad you are now being homeschooled. Now, this is what he says, though. Okay, so I had a chat with him, asked him a bunch of questions, and he says that the hard part of being homeschooled is he can't compete with anyone, right? He is the best student and the worst student of every class, right? And he said the other really hard thing is his mom is now playing the role of the class teacher, and I'm going to read out what he wrote me. He said, do not try this. Much worse than the actual teacher in school, LOL. There's not going to be any parent-teacher meeting. Ha ha ha. And I know exactly what it means. And I think this is also the very difficult thing about people who decide to homeschool is you have to be mom. You have to be teacher. You have to be counselor. You have to be the person disciplining them. You have to be the person advising them. You have to be the person gossiping with them. You have to be everything. And it's very hard to do. Like my close friend who I call the hippie supermom, because she's hippie supermom, she can do all of these things. I've seen her switch from one to the other in one moment, but not everyone can do this. It's a very overwhelming thing. And I actually think if you have to do it over the next few months, maybe you need help. Maybe, use videos online to teach them certain things. Maybe, I don't know, if you're two parents, maybe you can teach for some of the time. The other one person can teach on that. Look, I don't have kids, and I know people who have kids hate getting advice from people who don't have kids. So if you have kids and you have any ideas, any suggestions which could help it easier for people homeschooling, put them in the comments and I'll talk to them after I finish my little discussion with the son of a preacher man, okay? He asked what his biggest difficulty was, and he said his biggest difficulty was making friends. And I think that is the hardest thing about homeschooling, is the social aspect, because the homeschooled kids I've met are all very clever. Often they are further ahead academically than people in formal education because they've got a full-time teacher who loves them, right? So in terms of education, often it's much better academically, but socially, that is where the struggle is, because where do you meet people? Where do you play with people? Where do you learn little skills? Also, where do you develop your first crush? There's so many things which you learn from other kids which aren't on the curriculum. You learn fashion, right? Sometimes bad fashion. But I wouldn't have known in the 80s to shave both sides of my head and have the top of my head in a box if I wasn't at school, right? You learn all sorts of little things, and replacing that is difficult. So I would say, especially in the time of Corona, even if you're homeschooling your kid, make sure you do Skype calls with other kids or other ways of connecting your kids to other kids, even if they're stuck in the house with you. Okay, so he said making school is tough, but when I asked him what the best thing is, he said the good thing about homeschooling is the discipline. Say goodbye to the beating you got at school. This time you talk about the mistakes you made in class and solve them together. That is lovely and heartwarming, because of course he was going to school in India where there's still corporal punishment, but in homeschooling his mom doesn't lay a finger off him, and they just have bonding moments. That's lovely. And I asked if he wants to do traditional school later in his life, and he said yes. He plans to go to the Berklee College of Music later on. Good luck with that. I won't say your name, of course. Good luck with that, son of a preacher man. I hope you go to Berklee College of Music. I look forward to buying your albums or watching you conduct orchestras or whatever you end up doing. Excellent. So before the jokes, let me take one more look at the comment. Natri says, when you were in school, they would sit you outside or they would put you in the corner. Teachers would call you stupid too, LOL. Oh, what a shame. The question is, were you stupid? Right? Not are you stupid now, but were they calling you stupid? Why did they think you were stupid? Were you just naughty? Because I think often people mistake naughtiness for stupidity when you're too clever, so you're being naughty. Time for the jokes. Are you ready for the jokes, people? Are you ready for the jokes? Here come the jokes. So I wrote a bunch of jokes, a few jokes on the subject of teaching and education. Okay, so the first one is this, right? Teachers in the UK went on strike, right? They went on strike. They're trying to get more pay. They're trying to get people not to cancel their pensions. And it didn't work. It didn't work. People ignored their demonstrations. People ignored their strike. Every time teachers strike, nothing happens. And I think teachers, they're missing a trick. They're missing a trick. Instead of going on strike, what they should have done is they should have just said, until you increase our salaries, until you bring back our pensions, we are going to teach nonsense. 7 times 4 is 294 kids. That is the way to enact change. And the other thing I think is amazing, though, is when the time of Corona is over, teachers, you are never gonna be in a more persuasive position, because parents are gonna be tired of their kids. They're gonna have headaches. They're gonna fully appreciate what you go through for them more than any other moment. And that's when you say, these are the things we want. These are the things they want. Oh, you don't want to give it to us? Well, take your kids back and try do what we do. That is my advice to teachers. Excellent. So that's the first joke. I hope some of you laughed. Part of the problem with when it's comedy without a crowd is you don't know. It's just you talking to yourself. So my second gag I wrote is actually about when I went to school. I went to a boarding school. And the punishment, it was corporal punishment, but the punishments were the cane. You'd be hit with a cane, or if you were extra naughty, you'd be hit with a tacky. A tacky is like, it's a word for a shoe. So you'd be hit with the shoe. But the weird thing was, the cane to me hurt more than the tacky. So if you were a little bit naughty, you were kind of punished. And if you were very naughty, you were punished less. So it was almost like if you're caught being in trouble, just say fuck you to the teacher or something and get yourself to the next level of punishment, because it hurt less. I don't think they tested the pain threshold on themselves. So that was one part of it. And then the other part of it was our headmaster was like, I don't know, he must have been like late 60s, early 70s. He was like a gray-haired guy. He had a monocle. He was like more British than Britain. This was at Kenton College in Kenya, right? And he was this old doddering man. And so when he was the person administering the punishment, when you were sent to the headmaster's office, that's how so the teachers wouldn't punish you themselves. They would send you to the headmaster's office. But if it was him, he's this old man and he can't whack you. He was so weak. It didn't matter being hit by him. But the problem is sometimes when you were sent for punishment, it was the deputy headmaster, Mr. Russell. I still remember his name. I don't remember the headmaster's name, but I remember the terrifying Mr. Russell. And Mr. Russell would beat the hell out of you and was young and vigorous. So it was almost like if you were naughty, you had to pick your day. You had to like almost like as you were walking, you see, oh, the headmaster's on. Today I can act out. Oh, no, it's Mr. Russell. Today I will be obedient. So that is joke number 2. And actually, that's all of them, because the third joke was actually the joke about, me trying to impress Annette by being a genius. But I ended up using it in the course of the show. So before I say my final thoughts, let me see what the comments are. So in school, Flameboy, in school you were bullied for your stutter and your weight. I am so sorry, Flameboy. I hope you used that bullying and turned it into something positive. I was bullied. I turned it into being a comedian. What have you used that pain for, Flameboy? You can turn pain into something positive. What else do we have here? Madman Abdi says, shush. Is that Prince Abdi who's saying shush? I think that sounds like something that Prince Abdi would do. It's another comedian just causing trouble in my messages. Well, those are all the questions, so I will move to my final thoughts. So my final thoughts is what I realized by talking to lots of people is the most amazing thing, which I hope people embrace while they're homeschooling, is the flexibility of it. One of the people I spoke to said that today the sun was out, right? So she's homeschooling, but the sun was out. So she said, I'm not going to teach indoors like normal. Let's do something different. So she got out her chalkboards took them outside into the lawn and turned it into a chalk day where they just scribble stuff on the chalkboard and draw stuff. The first person I spoke to, my hippie supermom friend, said to me that homeschooling, the wonderful thing about it is, again, you're creative and you do. I can't quote her. She's too eloquent for me. But essentially, she said much of the same thing: is that don't be rigid about it. You need to be more flexible with it. Go with what the day is. Go with what the I don't know. This is a very bad final thought because I cannot encapsulate all the wisdom that these wise women told me. Why was it only women? Huh? Homeschooling men in the house, please message me because I need to talk to one of you because all I talked to today was homeschooling women. Thais even says, homeschool allows for the freedom of the mind. You're able to explore what interests you and it invites curiosity. That was so well put. I think that will be my final thought. So that's my final thought of Coronacast comedy show today. I'm going to be doing it every day at 9 p.m. I'm going to keep doing it as long as Corona is here. So please come tune in if you can tune in. It's later on an edited version of it. I remove the waffle and it's just the jokes and just the bits which are working. Is put up on YouTube. It's put up on Instagram. Whatever platform, it's there. Please keep coming, or it's just me talking to myself like a madman. Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. This has been the Coronacast comedy show. Stay safe, and hopefully Corona will be vanquished. My comedy special, What the African Said, is on YouTube, totally free. So if you want well-produced comedy, not me just ranting at a screen, check it out, watch it, enjoy it. It's been a blast. Thank you for stopping in, and I will see some of you tomorrow.